Anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Saturday Matters again. As you all know, we're going to have Laureen Nussbaum, who actually knew Anne Frank and her family. One of the major, I guess, literary figures of the 20th century. Her diary certainly landed in our awareness with quite an effect. I remember reading it when I was in high school. Before we proceed.
All right. I have the tendency, I speak with an accent, which is a nuisance, I know, bad enough, but I also have the tendency to speak too fast. So if I rattle on, please stop me, slow me down. Don't be bashful. Just say, slow down, and I will try to. Okay? All right. Well, most people know that Anne Frank was born in June of 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany, as the second daughter of a Jewish family. Most people also know that they emigrated to the Netherlands, this in the fall and winter of 1933-34, and they moved to Amsterdam. On June of the 5th of 1942, Anne's older sister Margot was called up for labor camp. The next day, the family went into hiding. All this I assume most people know. On August the 4th of 1944, they were discovered and deported first to Westerbork, then to Auschwitz, finally to Bergen-Belsen, where Anne died probably in March of 1945, just weeks before the liberation of the camp. While in hiding, she wrote a diary that was subsequently made into a play and into a film and made her famous worldwide. She became kind of an icon of the child that perished in the Holocaust. What we do not need to know is who betrayed her. There was a big sensation a year and a half ago when a team of cold case sleuths thought they had found the betrayer of Anne Frank. There was an awful to do about it. With 60 Minutes gave a program on January 16 of 2022, and it was all over the whole world. It was very well set up hoax, although it wasn't meant to be a hoax. The people who did the research thought they had done the right work and that they had found the right culprit, a notary by the name of Adrian van der Berg. But when I saw the 60-minute program, my hair stood up on edge because there was so much ahistorical material in it with regard to the Jewish Council in Amsterdam having lists of hiding addresses, which was an absolute no-no. I was there, I know it wasn't true. And the fact that this Mr. van der Berg had betrayed the Franks to the German police in order to get his family exempted from being deported in August of 1944. Impossible. This is not how it was. In August of 1944, the Germans were not very interested anymore in ferreting out all the last Jews, and nobody could negotiate to be kept behind. So it was, I mean, it just didn't hold water at all. And it was so disturbing to the few of Anne Frank's friends that were still alive, like her friend Pik Goslar in Jerusalem. She was so indignant, she actually called me from Jerusalem and said, "What can we do? This is awful." It was just a consternation among us, the few who were still around. So it didn't hold water. And the big setup thing that was meant to have this revealing book published in several languages at the same night in January of 2022 it just imploded. The Dutch publisher apologized to their own authors, and the German publisher just hadn't published yet. Didn't publish it, and I mean, the whole thing imploded. It was pretty bad. So, besides, with 25,000 Jews in hiding in the Netherlands, 10,000 of them discovered one way or the other, it really does not matter to us survivors who betrayed them. I don't think it makes the slightest difference. Really. Why? What's so important about it? What is important about Anne Frank, though, is that she actually was a writer. She was not just this cute, sensitive little girl who kept a diary. No, she was really a writer, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. Let me see. I freely so now I have to find my way on my podcast. Yeah, okay. Beautiful, even handwriting. And that's the way she wrote everything. Not only her diary, but also the notes she took. She copied passages out of the literature she had read. It's all done in this beautiful handwriting without ever corrections, just very even and I think quite admirable. Wrote several articles about Anne, the writer, and in fact you can find one on the website, spring of 2004, done by the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, and I'm going to rely on some of my own writing instead of reformulating it again. So, what most people do not know, and what I would like you to learn today, is that there are two versions of Anne's diary. Her original jottings down and her rewrite. She decided in the spring of 1944 that she was going to write a novel, an epistolary novel, based on her diary, which she wanted to publish. And she got into that, started on May the 20th, and of course they were apprehended and deported in August, on August 4th of 1944. So she had 3.5 months, and in that time she wrote about 400 pages of her rewrite. And most people do not know it, but there is this book called The Critical Edition, which unfortunately this time around I could not get from the Seattle Public Library. I have it in Dutch, it's on the table there with other books, but the English edition, which I normally use when I talk, I just couldn't get. Somebody had brought it, had taken it out, which made me feel quite good. So there is a demand for the book. So I think in a way I feel good, but I cannot produce it here. Luckily I have some pages copied which I can use. But before I go into that, in the critical edition there is this schematics which shows that what Otto Funk published is the outer rectangle, he does, and the original written diaries, diary number 1 is on the left side here, diary number 2 is on the right side, and in between is the B version, the version, her rewrite, which starts at the beginning and continues till March of 1944. Now, actually, it's a misnomer to call diary number 2, because diary number 2 is lost. When the attic was raided, the papers that Otto Funk had in his briefcase were strewn over the floor, and after the Gestapo had left with the 8 people, Miep Gies, the secretary, and Beb Voskuil, the stenographer, went upstairs and gathered as many papers as they could, and they found diary number 1, number 3, and number 4, and the loose pages, the rewrites. And Miep put them all into her desk drawer, locked it up, and hoped that she would be able to return everything to Anne when she comes back. But of course, as we know, Anne didn't come back, so she gave the papers to her father. Her father then eventually took it to publish the diary that you know, but that diary is a mixture of the original version and of Anne's rewrite. And Otto Frank never let on that he had done that. He was a wonderful man. I was very fond of him. He was actually our best man at our wedding in 1947, just a few weeks after the diary came out. But he did not know anything about publications and how things should be done. And so he did something that he should not have done. Namely, he made his own version and said, it's complete and nothing of importance is left out. And then only said, well, yes, a few nasty things about her mother and about her exploring her body are the only things that are left out. Well, this is unfortunately not true. And I took it upon myself, starting in the 90s, to just keep protesting and agitating that we should really get to read the book that Anne wanted to publish. Now that sounds easier said than done, because the copyrights are in Basel with the Anne Frank Fund, and they make handsome money on the diary of Anne Frank, because the diary has been sold in so many languages in millions of copies, and they use that money for all kinds of good purposes, but still, they just have a hold on it. So the copyright laws in Switzerland, where they sit, and in Germany, in Switzerland, and in the Netherlands, and in the Anglo-Saxon countries, the copyright laws are such that until 50 years after the last time the book has been printed, the copyrights are locked up. After 50 years, you can, it's free and anybody can use the material. So the Anne Frank Fund very cleverly had somebody write a new edition of the Diary of Anne Frank, and some of you might even own that. It's called the definitive edition. Anybody has it? It's nothing definitive about it, and it's really, I think, a scandal. But they locked up the copyrights in 1996 for another 50 years. So nobody can publish the intentions of Anne. That's the copyright law in Switzerland, in the Anglo-Saxon countries, and in the Netherlands. Now the people of the Anne Frank Foundation, not fund, but foundation in Amsterdam, the people who run the Anne Frank House and do all the educative work, found a way out in Germany and in the Spanish-speaking countries. There are different copy laws. There you can get to a text 70 years after the author died. So Anne died, as we know, in 1945. So in 2015, the Anne Frank Foundation in Amsterdam, the people of the Anne Frank House, published the Diary of Anne Frank the way she had intended it to be published. A fragment, obviously, she didn't get it finished, in German, and that was subsequently translated into Spanish. So on this table you will see the book that Anne wanted to publish in German and in Spanish, but not in Dutch, the original language, and not in English. Such are the copy laws. All right. I was pretty instrumental in that, because I was the one that kept nagging the people at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam that we should have, we should read what Anne wanted to publish rather than what her father published. So hence I was intimately involved with this, and the afterword of the Spanish and of the German edition is by me. Okay. Can you see it?
Which part do you mean? This?
And I wanted to compare the two.
Oh,
No, that
okay.
doesn't work.
I think you have to show them one at a time.
Okay, well, then
There's the top.
then the thing doesn't work, and I'll just talk about it. I'll come back now to the critical edition, which was published in Dutch in 1986 and in English in 1989. And it shows the original writing of Anne, and that's the A version. No, I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. The A version is, A is the original version, yes. B is Anne's revised version, and C is what Otto Frank published. So you can see in parallel print, and this is just a page of that, and I'm sorry that we can't show the whole thing at the same time. So it's the A original version, B, Anne did not take it up in her rewrite, C, what Otto Frank published. And no, it's not relevant reading. What I want you to look is at my marks. There's this omission mark, and there's this mark for change. I'm just trying for you to see how Otto Frank changed things.
But we can't see it.
He added, for instance, she writes, I really have to trust myself. I can't even trust my dad, the most important issues. And he made it, I cannot always trust my dad. He added a word to weaken the statement. And he did little things like that. But it does. If you cannot see the whole page, then it doesn't work. I'm sorry. I didn't expect.
Her mother.
What I wanted to point out, and I'm disappointed that you cannot see the whole page, is that the A version, the original version, the B version, what Anne made out of it when she rewrote, and the C version, what Otto Frank published. But it's subtle. It took me many months to ferret it all out, to see the small differences he made. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I spoke away from the phone.
Sure.
Okay. But if you cannot see it, then we'll just have to, when you come up later on, you can look at some of those pages and get an idea. If you look at the Dutch edition of the critical edition, you can see how this has worked. It's really very interesting. Yeah.
So I'm having a hard time understanding the nature of the changes. In what language were they made?
That's all in Dutch.
So he changes in Dutch.
Yeah.
And then the translator also has the opportunity to deal with the text.
The translation, as far I can only judge the German and the English translation, and they are faithful translations. The changes and omissions are not in the translation, but they are done by Otto Frank.
But, okay. And the other thing that's missing is, what the devil is he doing? Why is he making any alteration at all?
Why did he do that?
Yeah.
Because Daddy knows best, and she was only a little girl.
Maybe it would help if I read just a little excerpt. Would you mind? Would you mind if I just read a little excerpt? No. Well, okay. This is your talk. I keep my mouth shut.
No, I think you have to read it. You have to read the diary yourself. I'm not going to read from the diary. That was not the intention of this talk.
Yeah.
And it would take me too far afield, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Now, I will read part of an article that I wrote for the Anne Frank magazine in 2004. This has been part of my life for a long time. The first weeks in hiding are so difficult for lively little Anne that she cannot even write about it in her diary. Late September, they went into hiding in June, July the 6th of 1942. Late September, after reading one of her favorite books by Sissy von Maxwell, a Dutch writer, which is written in a series of letters she decides to address her future diary to a member of that group of young girls. And one of the girls who's dearest to her is Kitty. These diary letters are in part childlike and gushy. They contain allusions to figures and situations from the books by Sissy von Maxwell, and some riddles and jokes, but also Anne's daydreams and remarks about her reading and about her experiences in hiding. Between these letters addressed to fictional persons, they are two directed to her real friend Jacqueline van Marsen, which of course were never delivered. Now, by the end of 1942, the original checkered diary was full, and except for the few open pages, which she filled up later on, and subsequently filled a number of notebooks with her diary letters, notebooks that she got from the office of her father's downstairs. She then decides to address these letters exclusively to Kitty. There is no doubt, however, that a call issued by the Dutch Secretary of Education and Culture sometime in March of 1944 via the BBC gave her the idea of rewriting her diary. And on May the 20th, she starts with her rewrite. And again, okay.
At long
Here,
last.
you see the top
yeah.
lines? At long last.
At long last, after a great deal of reflection, I have started my, I can't pronounce that, in my head.
Achterhuis.
Achterhuis?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
The house behind.
Okay, in my head, it is as good as finished, although it won't go as quickly as that really, if it ever comes off at all.
Now, this is a sentence you have never read because Otto Frank left it out. Just as one example of the liberties he took.
Her father deleted that sentence.
Yeah, so this is just one example of what he left out. Of course, if you look at the critical edition, there is no B version because Anne didn't get that far. She only got in her rewrite to the end of March of 1944. So it's a fragment, all right? And so I'm showing that Otto Frank left out the first sentence here. You can see that.
Yes, this one begins, last evening I came downstairs from the attic, and as I entered the room I saw it once.
The whole first paragraph.
Yeah, that whole first sentence is not there.
And what is interesting, which I only found out after thoroughly working with the critical edition, is that the day before, on May 19th of 1942, Anne writes that Peter is dear and he's a nice fellow, but I have no more important things to do. And if he ever wants to get close to me again, he will have to work a little hard for it, more or less, which is interesting. That is in the edition you have. So she makes a break with her infatuation with Peter and concentrates on her writing, very conscientiously, very consciously. And as I said, we wrote for about 400 pages in 3.5 months in her beautiful handwriting, without corrections. It just runs smoothly. She conceives of what she wants to say and she writes it. She really came to this decision over about 6 weeks, starting with the call by the Dutch Secretary for authentic papers to be saved in order to enable the Dutch people to rewrite their history or write their history after the war, which gave her the idea of writing a novel. She had one day, April 4 of 1944, where she had gone through an existential kind of crisis. She was really very, very down in the dumps and ended up with the resolve to become a writer, fully realizing that it will require her to work very hard. Between May 20 and August 4, I already mentioned this, she wrote 427 pages on this very thin paper that all of you still know that people used to make copies of business letters, carbon copies. So it was carbon copy paper, very thin paper, and that's what she wrote on. That's all she had, because during the war we didn't have the paper really. And that's what New Friesenberg was called, found. Beside her unfinished epistolary novel at Achterhuis, and Achterhuis means the house behind, because the way those Dutch canal houses were built, there was a front building and a back building, and so the attic where they were hiding was above the back building, hence she called it the Achterhuis. She left also a book of stories behind, which have been translated, and a notebook filled with quotations. It's amazing what books she read, many biographies and other good books, and she quoted, again in her handwriting, many, many pages of material that she found that she could learn from. Then I left the book also for you to look, but that's also in Dutch. I don't think that has been translated. I'm not sure about that one. She called it, had more is in a book, the book with beautiful sentences. So these were the sentences, the reading she did that were her schooling, her self-schooling in how to express yourself. So the text that she had prepared for publication, the fragment, can now, as I mentioned before, be read in German and in Spanish. And I think I mentioned it already, but if I didn't, I will mention it again. The Anglo-Saxon and Dutch copyright laws are that it has to be 50 years after the last edition has been published. The copyrights are free. In Germany, in German-speaking countries, in Spanish-speaking countries, it's 70 years after the death of the author, which, since Anne Frank died in 1944, was in 2019, and that's when this German edition came out. But it is, in a way, sad and unexpected that we can read Anne Frank's text in Spanish or German translation, but not in the Dutch original. I think that is really weird. It tells you something about the capitalization of everything people do. Copy laws reign supreme, even if it doesn't make any sense. This is in essence what I wanted to say. I have more material, but I thought there might be plenty of questions, so maybe we should have questions. But I will not be running around with a microphone. Somebody else will have to do that, because I don't think I can do two things at the same time. So,
Anyone have a question or a comment?
please ask.
Yeah, may I just clarify one thing? Because of the copyright laws, it's actually not legal to publish an English translation
Of the book that Anne wanted to publish.
of the one that Anne wanted to.
Yeah.
But it is published in Spanish and German.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. How old were you at that time? I mean, were you Anne's age or were
I'm
you
2 years older than Anne.
What was that?
I am 2 years older than Anne. She was born in 29, I was born in 27. But I knew her in a short period, I knew her quite well, because we mounted a play in my parents' apartment. And I was the stage director. I was 14, and Anne was one of the actors. In fact, she had principal role in this play. the princess with the nose. So that's when I saw her almost daily for a few weeks.
Karen, can
Yeah.
you use the microphone? Put the microphone.
Is the Spanish edition available in Spanish language bookstores in the United States? Or does it have to be?
I don't know, you'd have to look it up for me, it's on the table. I really don't know, it was sent to me.
Could you speak into that?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm glad you're speaking up. So, yeah, I think Al has a question.
And Al has a question.
Not a question, but a comment. When she died, she was only 15. And that's really impressive.
It is impressive, yes. And that's why I think people should know Anne the writer, because there are many other diaries by young people. I have a friend in Portland, Jack Boas, who actually published a number of diaries of young people, young Jewish people who were killed. But they're well written, they're sincere, but Anne is a writer. That makes a difference, at least particularly in her revised edition. There is a composition to each entry. She just worked on it from a writerly standpoint.
Hear an excerpt from the diary.
What kind of excerpt do you want?
Here are a couple paragraphs out of it. Have you heard what she's done?
Yes.
We can't hear her today.
She's asking if we could have an excerpt from the diary.
Well,
Yeah, I just read that one sentence, the one that Otto Frank deleted.
okay. This is on May the 20th, 1944, the day she started actually with her rewrite. And she writes to Kitty, "Dear Kitty, at long last, after a great deal of reflection, I have started my Achterhuis. In my head it is as good as finished, although it won't go that quickly, really, if it ever comes off at all. Last evening I came downstairs from the attic, and as I entered the room, saw at once the lovely vase of carnations lying on the floor, Mommy down on her hands and knees, mopping up, and Margot fishing up my papers from the floor. What happened here, I asked, full of misgivings, and not even waiting for the answer, tried to sum up the damage from a distance. My whole portfolio of family trees, writing books, textbooks, everything was drenched. I nearly wept and was so worked up that I began to speak in German, which she normally doesn't do. I can hardly remember what all I said, but Margot said that I let fly something from incalculable loss, schrecklich, entsetzlich, nie zu ergänzen, which means awful, terrible, never to be redressed. And still more, Daddy burst out laughing. Mommy and Margot joined in, but I could have cried over all the toil that was wasted, and the diagrams I had so carefully worked on. That's just one paragraph of her aviation.
Now, is that from the version that was originally published, or from?
This is her A version, so that is the what she wanted to publish. Yeah,
Okay.
but this was not yet part of the reworking because she didn't get that far. Her reworking stopped at March of 1944, and this is an entry of May of 1944. So this is as yet her raw diary, but even that is very well written, as you can see. Let me see whether I can find something.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, the reworking is a version that cannot be published in English?
Cannot be published in English.
Yes. Okay.
Except in the critical edition where you have to read it parallel, which is hardly, you know.
Oh,
You can see how the critical edition. Well,
but here you have it.
well, this is a page of the critical edition with the A version and the B version
Yeah,
and the C version. Okay?
okay.
So here we have the three versions. The A version being the original, the B version being Anne's rewrite, and the C version being what Otto said.
Yeah, okay. Then the second half of 1943, I became a young woman, an adult in my body, and my mind underwent a very great change. I came to know God. I started to think, to write, and I discovered myself. So that's her
Original version.
original version. The
Yeah.
second, these sentences in the, and this is the published version.
No, this is the reason.
That's her rewrite.
Oh, and this is her revision that she never was able to complete.
Yeah.
Things improved slightly in the second half of the year. I became a young woman and was treated more like a grown-up. I started to think and to write stories and came to the conclusion that the others had nothing to do with me anymore. They had no right to throw me about like a pendulum clock from left to right. I wanted to change in accordance with my own desires. I realized that I could do without Mummy completely and utterly. That was hurtful, but one thing that struck me even more was when I realized that even Daddy would never become my confidant. I trusted no one but myself any longer. Okay, and this is her. Okay, this is the Anne Frank that she revised
Yeah.
to be more according to her wishes. All right, and let me get the C version here.
It's Otto Frank.
This is what Otto Frank, her father, Daddy knows best. Things improved slightly in the second half of the year. I became a young woman and was treated more like a grown-up. I started to think and write stories and came to the conclusion that the others no longer had the right to throw me about like an India rubber ball.
The pendulum is a much better image.
I wanted to change in accordance with my own desires, but one thing that struck me even more was when I realized that even Daddy would never become my confidant over everything. I didn't want to trust anyone but myself anymore. So yeah, there's distinct differences there.
Oh yeah, and there is the things in brackets are additions by Otto Frank. Over everything he added and
Yes,
wanted
oh,
to-
yeah,
he
my
added.
confidant over everything,
Yeah.
and her version is my confidant, period.
Period, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
well, that's very, wow,
Yeah.
wow. That's eye-opening, does it, okay,
So there were other questions.
I don't want to hog the microphone. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Gail?
Laureen, do you know whether anyone has read the German and or the Spanish and written about the changes which would not be prohibited by copyright?
The question is whether anybody who had read the Spanish or the German version
Right, and compare them to the published versions and discuss the changes that were made.
I do not know. I do not know. This all happened in 2019. It's relatively recent, and I have not been back to Amsterdam since. I don't know.
Thank you.
I could find out though. Any other questions?
Yeah, let's see.
Question over
Yeah,
here.
there's a question.
Okay. So you started out by...
Put it close to your mouth,
You
please.
started out by saying that this 60 Minutes version was untrue. Do people now guess someone else might have been responsible for arresting the family?
I'm afraid I don't understand what you.
I'll repeat that.
the 60 Minutes version,
Yeah.
the story that turned out to be untrue about who betrayed the Frank family,
Yeah.
are there any other potential explanations about who was the betrayer?
Oh. People have asked that question again and again, and at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, which I think is the best authority, they just do not know. There are many possibilities. For instance, the fact that Miep brought food to the house every day. Somebody could have watched that. I mean, how could an office need that much food every day? And so somebody in the neighborhood could have observed that. That's the most plausible explanation. One of the people who worked in the warehouse was suspected for many years, but they lifted the suspicion because they could not nail him down. They don't think it was the right guess. It's very, people, the 10,000 hidden Jews who were discovered were not always betrayed. Sometimes they betrayed themselves. Number one, by being too close to the window and being seen during the day. Number two, more plausible and more often, when they had to change addresses. Dutch houses are notoriously small. The whole country is sort of dredged out of the water, and so there is not much living space. So imagine a family that took in a person in hiding, and then they get a baby, and they need this room for the baby. Or their own old mother has to be taken care of, so they need this room for the mother. So then the person who has been in hiding for many months or years somehow has to be transferred to another address. And that's when people very often betray themselves by being very pale. They hadn't been outside for months or years, and very apprehensive. And so they sort of almost betrayed themselves by the way they looked and by the way they behaved. So many people were found as they were transferred from one address to another. So that was another very often occurring thing. By and large, the Dutch Nazi Party, when they were at their strongest at the time that the Germans were still winning, and there are always people who like to be on the winning side. 5% of the Dutch population were members of the National Socialist Party. 5%, so that was a very small minority. Most Dutch people were either anti-German occupants or at least neutral. And many people who did take people in hiding were drawn in by neighbors or friends, the normal way that these things happen, not officially, but underground. There was, after all, a Dutch underground. And the Dutch underground was not like the French Maquis fighting. They were sustaining and helping by and large, because the Netherlands is not a country where you can hide easily in a wild forest. There are no wild forests. Even a forest looks like a park in the Netherlands, and it's all very open. So the underground was mostly preoccupied with creating falsified papers for people who were illegal, Jews and others. And the Dutch printing press is rightly famous elsewhere. The printer has an international name. So they were very, very good in printing false papers. And via personal networks, they helped a lot of people. After all, as I said, 25,000 people had been in hiding. And the 10,000 who were found was practically never because of the people where they were hiding, but because of other circumstances. By the way,
go ahead.
The Frank family was really an exception. Hardly anybody could hide as a family. People usually hide singly, or maybe a couple would hide together if they were very lucky, because of the lack of space. The fact that they had the upstairs back office at their disposal for themselves and for the Van Daan family, which really Van Pels is the name, and for the dentist also, was really exceptional. You hardly ever had a big group like that hiding together.
Yeah. Just, can you remember just exactly how large, how many square feet the place was where the Franks were hiding and the other family? There were what, 8 people? All squeezed in?
Yeah, so there were 8 people.
Yeah.
8 people. There were 8 people altogether, and Anne, to her chagrin, shared her room with the dentist. Margot moved in with her parents. There was on one level and an upstairs level where the Van Daans in the book, but Van Pels is the real name. They had a room, and then Peter on the attic, above the attic, had a little room of his own. So there were 8 people altogether.
Al, here they come.
Well, it seems the Frank family was well-to-do, lots of space, lots of reading for Anne, so that she didn't have just a standard teenage upbringing. She had a really, in some ways, privileged upbringing.
Oh yes, yes, they were. The Franks had belonged to the rather well-off German Jewish bourgeoisie, and all of us were well read. That was part of the background. Yes. Yeah. A big bookcase was just a natural thing. It belonged to you furniture, full of good books, and not necessarily just in German. Also in my case, my parents' case, in French and Dutch, of course.
Any others? Laureen, thank you so much for this unusual point of view